And we're live. What's up, people?
Oh, you know.
The regular. So today on Save versus Bourbon, we're going to be talking about politics, but we're not going to be talking about real life Actually, we're going to be drinking, so we might talk about real life politics. But before that, the point of the episode is to talk about in-universe politics. It's to talk about how a political system informs a role-playing game, or any kind of game, really, I guess, and what you do with a political system in order to make a better roleplay experience.
This will also be known as the episode where Steven tries not to drink himself into a coma.
Isn't that every episode?
Yeah, but politics are politics for me.
Reasonable. So, to introduce ourselves, as we do at the beginning of every episode, I am Brandon. I have run tabletop games for 15 years now. I like to think I'm pretty decent at it. I am a world builder. I am a game maker, game creator, and I only very rarely get to actually play anything. But I survive. I'm okay with that. And then this gentleman, who sounds exactly like me, is Steven.
Yes, our voices do sound eerily similar. In my case, I'm less of a game runner, although I have done my share, or less in the case of some of my friends, of running campaigns in 3.5 or Pathfinder, but also playing a great deal as well. Primarily my thing is I just enjoy building worlds and diving in and exploring all the minutiae and everything that revolves around topics and subjects and everything. How does a world work? And unfortunately, for my case, despite my fact to try to avoid them, I end up having to deal with politics in most worlds I work on with other people or look into in any way. So fuck it, bite the bullet, drink some more, let's go.
Yes, indeed. So we're going to start with something that's, well, pretty far away from all of our hearts because, I'd like to be good and drunk before we start talking about political systems that mirror the one we're actually living in. So I'm going to take a moment to talk about feudalism.
Oh boy, this can link into so many of the things I've picked out for later.
So, for those unfamiliar with medieval politics, and no shame if you are, but feudalism as a concept basically amounts to there is some kind of centralized government which controls a number of feudal lords who control sections of a kingdom. They all answer to the king, but their own individual kingdoms are kind of their personal property. And they can do pretty much anything they want there as long as it's not, against the king or lord or emperor or whoever the feudal leader is.
As long as they keep responding to the call of the banners and keep sending their taxes, the king does not give a fuck.
Precisely. Historically there were some limitations to that, like medieval serfs had certain rights that if they believed the lord was violating those rights, they could take that to the king, and the king could punish the feudal lord, and there was all kinds of little stuff that could go on behind the scenes, but that was pretty much the idea of it, that everyone has their own area that they control so long as they continue answering to the king.
You mean politics have always had backdoor deals?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm going to talk about why feudalism. I'm going to talk about why feudalism is good. Wait.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about why feudalism makes good stories.
There you go.
Feudalism 2019. But feudalism makes good stories. And the reason for that is that if you have a campaign or a story that's taking place over in a single kingdom over a certain amount of time, then you can go about that a couple of different ways. You can have a single centralized government. You could have like an elected council or a senate or or you could have a king without the feudalist part. And the result of that would be a country that's basically unified, right? It's a country that is the same in one place as it is in another because they're all answering to a single centralized authority. But when you have feudalism in your game, that allows you to have two areas of the same kingdom be completely different because they're under different lords, and it can create a situation where the feudal lords are constantly vying for control, vying for power, and creating a lovely and delightful pile of conflicts that can be pretty useful for any campaign that's not going to be just adventuring.
Well, I mean, it can be useful for adventuring campaigns as well. The way to look at it like this, you can very easily do a simple bare bones campaign where you have the king or a regional governor, whatever top dog official you have, and they just do everything. It's not so much lazy writing as it's just an easy way to avoid having to just completely dive into all the bureaucracy and minutia of setting up a government in whatever game or system you're doing. But the more people you add into the equation in terms of the hierarchy, or even just if you have a republic of some sort, which I'm sure we'll get on later, the more people you have involved in the entire process, the more plot hooks you have, which behooves you as a game master, as a storyteller, as a writer, whatever you're trying to do. The more people you have to call upon for your characters to interact with, the more chances you have to take the story routes that you need to tell your tale.
That's right. That's true. And that's one of the things that feudalism tends to do pretty well, is that sense of factionality. You don't want to hit your players with too much information at one time, right? Obviously. But you can say, in a feudal society, you can say, well, this land is owned by this lord who is enemies with this lord and who recently, I don't know, married off his second cousin twice removed to the king's third daughter or something, you know? That's quick and easy and simple to understand. And then your players can see the state of this land. They can see, you know, what they can see how the peasants are living and what kind of conflicts have happened in this area, they can see the state of the local forests if you've got a druid on your team. So, the feudalistic method is able to give your players a lot of really important salient information pretty quickly because it's not contingent on really anything else. Like, it doesn't... If an adventure is taking place inside the land of a particular lord, then you really only need to know about him. You don't need to know the full politics of the kingdom. You don't need to know really a lot of information.
This is very true. I really don't have much to add in that case other than, you know, when you're dealing with a situation like that, it's fairly easy for your characters to judge and, you know, take in how the actual kingdom is going.
Right. And
you do.
What I was kind of trying to get at was that if the kingdom isn't going well, your party can also tell pretty quickly who's to blame for that.
Indeed. You also end up in lovely situations. Shot occurs of a man and another man walking along a levee, one bashing coconuts together.
Yes, exactly that.
No kings round here.
Look, all I'm saying is if a lady comes out of the lake, like literally out of the lake, and throws a sword at me, that probably does make me king.
It either that or you're insane. Unless you have a sword in your hand, in which case,
well, in which case I might still be
king.
insane, but you don't want to tell me that.
True. I'd never want to argue with someone holding a sword, unless I'm holding a gun.
You know what everybody's favorite feudalist society is, right?
I'm sure there's differing opinions on.
No, there's not, because it's Warhammer 40k.
Hey mate, what's the last thing you thought to see in the British skies?
Oh, that's a really deep question. No.
See, you're wrong. It's blimps.
Yes, indeed. Are we just gonna meme out all night? Is that what we're doing? I mean, I'm fine with that. I am okay with that, but
I mean, as we always say, 95% of our conversations are memes.
Actually, you know what? I'm about to have a digression here, because I just realized, right, when you actually stop and think about it, okay? The Imperium, the Warhammer 40k Imperium. So, yes, if you don't worship the Emperor, they're gonna murder you. Sure, okay, fine.
Or at least an aspect of the Emperor.
Right. Well, no, I'm gonna get to that. Hang on. I'm building up to a point. I promise I'm building up to a point. So, if you don't worship the Emperor, they're gonna murder you. And if you're not human...
If you're lucky, servitors are a thing.
That's true. Well, but they're not... I mean... They're not aware. Servitors might as well be dead. It doesn't... I mean, it's still death.
Really? Because I've seen shit that says that they are completely aware of what's going on around them. They just are kind of locked in their brain.
That really skirts grimderp, I'm going to be honest.
Well, I mean, I also imagine it depends entirely on what you want to do. Sure, if you just need menial labor, it doesn't matter. But if you want to punish someone, you leave them fully aware.
True. But, okay... What I'm saying is, okay, yes, you don't worship the Emperor, they're going to do bad things to you. If you're not human, they're going to do bad things to you. If they think you might be a witch, they're going to do bad things to you. But besides those three things, right, you can get away with pretty much anything.
This is a true statement.
Like, you know, it's a theocracy, sure, but everyone in the setting worships the Emperor slightly differently. Half of them don't appear to be actually worshipping the Emperor at all. They just say they do.
I mean, you've got the various agri-worlds worshipping the Emperor as the sun, or essentially Apollo.
You've got the Mechanicus secretly worshipping a Catan while pretending it's the Emperor.
Or, you know, the lower levels not understanding it's Catan and believing they're worshipping the Omnissiah.
Right.
As the Emperor.
But that's my point, though. Like, a feudalist society, which is what it is, because you've got the imperial seat on Terra, but then everything's ruled by regional governors. That is feudalism. But because it is feudalism, the central government really only has a very few rules. Worship the Emperor, pay your taxes, be human. That's literally it.
Well, I mean, aside from the fact that it's not just taxes you're paying, it's also the worlds have to give on their tithe of psychers and, of course, men for the meat grinder.
Yeah, but that's taxes.
I mean, excuse me, men and women for the meat grinder.
This is what I'm getting at. This is what I'm getting at. In a lot of ways, despite being a terrifying dystopia in which no person should ever be subjected to life, in a lot of ways, Warhammer 40k is, like, relatively progressive. Or the Imperium. Not the game, necessarily. Well, that's a whole nother kettle of fish. The Imperium, though, is relatively progressive, isn't it?
It actually is. And you also have to look at it like this. The Imperium is made up of millions of worlds. By and large, the only ones we ever see are the ones that are being invaded by a Tyranid high fleet or on a Necron tomb world.
Right. I've heard this argument before, that the grim darkness of the 40th millennium is not actually that grimdark. We just see the grimdark portions of it, which makes sense.
I mean, it's like talking about in terms of World War II. By and large, Europe was a hellhole until, in America, nothing was really going on until Japan came, and then we got involved in the world. But until that point, it was mainly just, well, you guys do your thing over there, and
Okay,
we're over
while
here all
that's
safe.
true, I'm going to point out that World War II didn't last 10,000 years.
Fucking Lorgar.
God damn it, Lorgar. But anyway, that's kind of what I'm saying. So that kind of like neo-feudalism doesn't necessarily have to be backward. You can create a feudalist society, even a theocratic society, that can be pretty inclusive when you think about it. Like, women warriors, 40K.
Yeah,
Their entire, they are
sorority.
female. Yeah.
Yeah, female Imperial Guardsmen, female Imperial Guard regiments.
I am going to bitch for just a second that even though there are supposed to be female Imperial Guard regiments, I cannot find a single female model.
Yeah, that's an oversight on Games Workshop's part, and they need to fix that. Get on it, GW.
You know what? We could have an entire episode on all the things Games Workshop needs to fix.
I mean, we could have an entire episode on the things that they do right.
Welcome back, Phoebe.
Yeah.
True. But that's kind of what I'm getting at. You can have female inclusion, and you can have, LGBT inclusion, because they do in 40K. You can have...
Not so much in Warhammer Fantasy. The Empire in Warhammer Fantasy is fairly against that, if I remember correctly from various stories.
Well, and parts of the Empire in 40K are against it too, but it's feudalism. One place may be against it, but another may not be.
This is true.
But that's what I'm saying. You can have, and you know what? Warhammer 40K does not have racism.
What's that? Humanity is humanity unless you're a mutant or an alien or Xenos.
Right, but like some of the stable mutants are human. They're treated as such. Ratlings?
Well, I mean, to be fair, Ratlings are mistrusted
because they're because they're actually genetically thieves.
They're genetically halflings with long guns.
Right, and halflings are thieves.
Not always.
You know what? Yes, all halflings. Hashtag yes, all halflings.
Good God, man! You're gonna alienate anybody who plays halflings.
But they all know I'm right. Everyone who plays a halfling has also played a kleptomaniac. I'm gonna say it right now. So, if you have played a halfling who isn't a kleptomaniac, please write to us at Brandon, you're being terribly racist. Padre Luminadre's Twitch.
Correct. But yeah, you're right on a lot of counts there. Unless you're just a completely unstable mutant or a Xenos, the Imperium does not care for you. Hell, there are even societies in the Imperium of Man of full-on mutants that are just looked over because, well, they're not causing breakout of heresy. But we're not going to waste resources exterminating them when we could put all of our men to fighting the enemies of the Imperium.
Exactly. I'm going to address that in just a second. Hang on, I've been vindicated. Don't look for Phoebe says Rui was no klepto. She was a sleight of hand artist. Yeah, almost like a klepto.
I guess to be fair, even the most famous examples of halflings, Bilbo and Frodo, were technically thieves.
Frodo, I'm not so sure about. I don't remember him stealing anything.
He at least looted dwarven graves in Moria with everyone else.
Yeah, everyone did that, though. I mean, they're dwarven graves. You just loot them, right? Like, you don't leave sleeping dwarves to lie.
She didn't. She never took anything that she didn't earn through another stupidity. True. That
that's
makes
probably
sense.
True. Anyway, Bilbo, though. Bilbo was specifically hired as a thief. His contract says thief.
I thought his contract said burglar, but...
Right, his contract says burglar. Sorry. But a burglar is a thief, though.
True, and then again, I'm also, one to talk because by and large, 95% of my characters have always been a rogue.
We just digressed from a digression. To go back to my point, what I was trying to get at was that you can actually use feudalism in basically any setting, and it kind of works. And it kind of works whether you want to be oppressive and bureaucratic, or kind of more open and tolerant. You can do feudalism either way, and it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, this really works fairly well.
Tell me, man, feudalism is it's the right government. Wait.
Well, going off of that premise, I want to do a bit of a diversion a little bit. There's another, not as popular as 40K, but fairly popular in most circles, or some circles, sci-fi franchise. One that is near and dear to my heart, BattleTech.
Yes, you mentioned this very briefly, and I'm super down to hear about it. Now, I am going to preface what you're about to say, though. He has said a series of words about the thing he's going to talk about, BattleTech's political system, and the result of those words that I saw on the Discord was that my brain liquefied and melted out of my ears.
Oh, it's glorious.
All right, so story time with Steve today. BattleTech politics.
Right. So, in the history of BattleTech, it's almost a story as 40K. You could dive into the various history of the conflicts and everything, but by and large, most people are familiar with the setup of, let's say, around the Inner Sphere and the clan invasion of the Inner Sphere. Around that time, the Inner Sphere, which is the quote-unquote good guys of the setting, much like the Imperium of Man, are divided up into, let's say, up until the year in the setting, based on the standard calendar setting of 2787. And they're just basically divided into six regions of space that are predominantly ruled by aristocratic noble houses. The top dogs being House Merrick, House Davian, House Karita, House Steiner, House Liao, and House Cameron. And this is a region of space based around Terra. And, each one that is vying for control in this region, because it's a franchise based upon the conflict of these noble houses, has a different form of government. House Liao, for example, uses Troika.
Would you explain Troika to me? Because I actually don't know that word.
Let me get pulled up. I'm currently following along on the Sarna.net, which is the BattleTech wiki, which is glorious reading for anybody who's interested.
Yes, I should probably go read that.
Alright, so the Capellan Confederation, headed by House Liao, started out as a collection of states united for common defense, well-being, yada yada yada. It has evolved into become an autocratic state with a controlled economy, while appearing to be nothing more than an absolute dictatorship to outsiders. The Confederation's government is closer to that of a troika, composed of three legislative bodies: the Chancellor, the Prefectorate, and the House of Scions. Each competes with the other for power, and even the strongest chancellors have had to cooperate with the other two in order to pursue their policies. So, kind of sort of the three-tier system that you have. Chancellor being top dog, the Prefectorate, essentially being an advisory council, with each elected senator. I mean, by and large, also remember that all these people are from House Liao. Like, that's basically the noble house that controls this area of space, and they're all, everybody for the council is elected from that.
Right.
Then you have the House of Scions, which is comprised of compelling nobility, essentially there to check the power of Chancellor and the Protectorate. So you look at it from a system very similar to America's, with the President, the House and Senate, and the Supreme Court, as it were.
Okay. This does not seem that complex so far.
That's one of them.
Oh. So how does it work between... never mind. Explain the others, and then tell me how it works between them.
Well, I can tell you how it works between them. By and large, they're all out to establish their own domain over the inner sphere, which is essentially the centralized portion of the galaxy, with you have the outlying... And they're all vying to be number one. Let's go to one that more people will be familiar with. The Lyran Commonwealth, are also known as House Steiner.
Did you say House Stark?
House Steiner.
I'm gonna go with House Stark.
Maybe. House Steiner being famous for the meme of a scout lance is comprised of 4 100-ton assault mechs, all atlases. That is how you scout. So Steiner started out fairly easy. It was inspired in part by ancient Athens. The Lyran Commonwealth was headed by 9 archons. Eventually, they kicked that right out the fucking door, and one archon, mainly in the house of Katrina Steiner, for most of the lore I'm familiar with, being the archon in control of the House Steiner and the Lyran Commonwealth. So essentially, you go from having 9 different rulers to just one guy in charge of everything.
Sure.
Then you have their closest allies, because they intermarried. You have House Davian, which is a bit more of a...
So far we have House Stark and House Dario.
Yeah.
I'm playing, I'm sorry.
Federated Sons, or the Federation, by, known as such by their citizenry, is headed by House Davian, and they're predominantly based around the noble house, leading everything, much like Steiner, but the princes can... I'm just kind of skimming over this as best as I can, because I did not do all of my...
Did you forget to do your homework?
Well, no, I didn't forget. I just didn't jot everything down the way I meant to.
Ah.
So essentially, it turns into the UK parliamentary system, with House Davian's first prince being at the top of it, like the royal family. Where things get interesting is there is a marriage between the aforementioned Katrina Steiner and Victor Davian, I believe it was, and then you had the Federated Commonwealth. So you had House Davian and House Steiner join to basically form a supreme bloc.
Actually, you know what? This kind of sounds like one of the Gundams, I think.
Probably. It was in response, this became popular because, hey, we're Western developers who like giant mecha, but we have no Western giant mecha things to play with, so let's make our own, and steal designs under the table from Japanese developers, which was a lawsuit that...
The timeless classic.
Indeed. So you have Steiner, Liel, then you get into the Free Worlds League, headed by House Merrick, which is, quote-unquote, ostensibly a federal republic, which each province accorded a measure of self-rule, while the representative parliament served as the supreme federal authority. So something near and dear to your heart.
Right, yes.
They're Romans with giant mechs.
Yes, I gathered that much, yes.
Then you have House Kurita, which the Draconis they're essentially samurai, because of course they are.
Well, I mean, it's almost like there had to be one, you know?
I mean, you had Liao, who were ostensibly Chinese, Steiner, who was essentially German, Davian, which was French. You have Kurita being Japanese, and the Kurita, or the Draconis Combine, are said to be supported by the 5 pillars, each symbolizing an aspect of draconian society. You have the Pillar of Gold, Pillar of Steel, Pillar of Teak, Pillar of Ivory, Pillar of Jade.
Okay, this sounds real familiar.
Pillar of Gold representing government, Steel, military, Teak, the people, and culture. Ivory is philosophy and religion, and Jade representing the economy.
Right, and it's real simple. So that sounds like... Okay, so it's not the same, but it sounds real similar to the Tao's Wind, Water, Air, Fire, and Heart.
It is very similar to the caste system. However, it's more along the lines of, at the top of it all, you have the coordinator, who is the emperor.
Fan theory.
Uh-huh.
The Tao are managing to expand their empire so quickly because they have access to Captain Planet by their powers combined.
Yeah, Captain Planet's Commander Farsight. You didn't know that? Not Farsight. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that my random fan theory turned out to be canon. Sweet.
I don't know. I'm just talking shit at this point.
Yeah, that was literally what I was doing.
Pretty much.
So anyway, the five pillars, right?
The 5 pillars. You have the coordinator at the top, quote unquote, the emperor, referred to as the dragon by most people in the citizenry. Below the coordinator, you have the Kuritan House Kurita nobility, essentially warlords beneath him. So you have the emperor, daimyo, shoguns, all that fun stuff. And last but not least, you have the Terran hegemony, run by House Cameron.
Hegemony.
Yep.
So, do explain the Terran hegemony. Hegemony.
It's one of the ones I'm least familiar with. Predominantly because I'm more familiar with the other houses. I haven't really come up with House Cameron and Terran hegemony yet, but I'm guessing it's based around Terra and was fallen out. But so that's just the noble houses of the Inner Sphere. You also have the fact that the economy is based around C-bills, and C-bills are based upon how much, essentially, data transmission. However long it takes for so much information to travel faster than light from one area to another, and that is where they get their currency from.
So, wait, they're trading Bitcoin?
They're essentially trading Bitcoin.
No wonder it's all messed up.
Oh, it gets better. So there's a neutral party known as Comstar, who regulates all of the HPL arrays, which are the faster than light hyperpulse link arrays on various planets that allow them to transmit data across from system to system, so on and so forth. They're essentially a power unto their own because the HPL arrays or HPG arrays, they're considered almost sacred because everybody, as with everything in the far future, everybody forgot how to make shit.
That seems to happen every time.
Right? So it is considered the utmost sin to attack one of these arrays and take it down, because then you have Comstar coming after you, and they just, since they control the economy, they have a lot of good toys. So they're a power unto themselves. And then at one point in history, they decide, shit you not, to have a schism with one side being known as the Word of Blake. And they had a jihad.
The Word of Blake. It's like the Magnificent Crusade of Joe. The the new gospel of Steve.
Correct. So that's a thing that happens, but the Word of Blake broke most of the agreed upon things, i.e., in this universe, it is you cannot orbital bombard planets, and nuclear weapons are straight up forbidden. And they just straight up, and the Word of Blake decided, we're going to nuke a bunch of planets and piss everyone off.
Right, and is that why they ended up making a weapon to surpass Metal Gear?
Essentially something along those lines, except they're all, they had Metal Gear forever. So they do that. They turn the entire universe against them, as it were. So all the Intersphere houses come together, which hadn't occurred previously until the clan invasion. And the clans are another power in this lovely little clusterfuck. They're all humans, but they're essentially vat-born. Because there is a period of time where, when all these noble houses started warring for, power, that the leader of the Star League Defense Forces, a man named Nicholas Kerensky, saw that everything was going to shit and said, fuck all you guys, I'm taking my guys and my toys and I'm leaving. And he led half the Star League Defense Force away from this clusterfuck and set up their own system of worlds. And then they started his own cult about going back and taking over the inner sphere and from these warring children. And essentially they started to make the best tech and that grow their warriors, and essentially installed a caste system where you have your laborers, you have your merchants, and at the top of it you have your mech warriors.
Sure.
And they also instilled a system of blood names, where a person is born with a name, but they don't mean anything. The only way they can succeed and advance in society and have their genetic material passed on is if they compete in grueling challenges, various rites of refusal or naming and so on and so forth, to gain their name, which basically boils down to you have a rookie pilot sit in a mech and they have to fight endless waves of superior mech warriors until they are either killed or defeated, and then they can gain their blood name and contribute to the genetic stock.
Sounds terrible.
It is. They also view anyone who is freeborn, i.e., when a man loves a woman, in that situation, they view them as dirty. When a man loves a woman.
There you go.
Anyway. So going from that, they have a system where they're essentially vat-born. They're not clones, as they have two genetic parents who they just take the genetic material from and just to grow babies. And they're supposed to, and then a little bit of tweaking here and there, and they become absolute beastly warriors.
And all of this just because somebody decided to write the Gospel of Gilbert.
Well, no, the Word of Blake came later.
Oh.
You had the warring states. Kerensky took his guys and fucked off. Various succession wars. The clans came in and they were stopped. The clans were a unified front, and they started breaking off because they have their own internal politics, known as either being a Crusader faction or a Warden faction, i.e. whether or not they want to protect the Inner Sphere or completely take it over. I'll let you figure out which one's which. And it gets even worse because it's not even divided among the clans themselves. We have Clan Wolf, Clan Smoke Jaguar, Clan Jade Falcon, Clan Diamond Shark, so on and so forth, with some of them being Warden, some of them being Crusader. Amongst the clans, you have warriors who are either Crusader faction or Warden faction. So there's more infighting going on.
Okay. So what you're saying is, in the grim darkness of the far future,
The warriors of the far future, the men and women, the elite of the elite. They are known as mech warriors.
Yeah, but, like, they would just get steamrolled by an Orkwog.
Yes, but, you know, a standard mech is at least, 10 meters tall, 35. A light mech is like 10 meters tall, 35 tons.
So almost the size of a Warhound Titan.
Almost. That's a light mech. Then you have your mediums, your heavies, and your assaults. I.e., and where I get my namesake from, the Mad Cat or the Timberwolf is 75 tons, about 15 meters tall. Can fire 40 rockets, long-range rockets a salvo. We kitted out with various either rail weaponry or particle projectile weaponry and various lasers or pulse lasers, and can turn most ground vehicles into slag and pretty much anything and can duke it out with anything up to the big 100-ton, things like Atlases or Daishis.
Sure.
Or so mechs are not to be fucked with. They're not, on the scale of Imperial Titans. They're on the scale of Imperial Titans, but there are more of them.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, so anyway, okay, so that all happened before the Gospel of Gilbert?
That all happened years and years before the Word of Blake Jihad.
Oh, wait, but all of this stuff has happened, like, in-game, right?
All of this has happened in-game.
So the original version would have been this, or not, I don't know what the original version would have been, but this stuff that you're talking about happened years and years ago from our perspective.
Essentially, so the original game was essentially you had the Star League, and they would put down anyone who, they're very Imperium of Man, anyone who wasn't with them was against them, and they would be put down.
Sure.
Hard. Then you had you had a bit of a civil war. Whose the details I'm less familiar with than other aspects of the lore. So you had a civil war. One guy who is essentially Satan.
Wait, like literally Satan?
Well, not literally, but he's the worst war criminal in the history of the franchise. In universe, he's more reviled than Horus is in 40K because, at least some people like Horus in 40K.
Well, more importantly, not everyone knows about Horus.
True. But in this franchise, everyone remembers his family's name, and everyone reviles his family's name. A mark of shame in the clans is they have to wear his house sigil on their armor if they just completely and utterly fuck up. So they're on a suicide mission and they can no longer wear their sigils. They have to wear the sigil of his house as a sign of dishonor.
Okay, gotcha. So it's like tattooing a swastika on somebody and putting them on the front lines.
Yeah, essentially. So at that point, Kerensky takes his guys and fucks off, and you have 4 different succession wars spaced out over several hundred years. Then the clans come back. Their invasion gets stalled. You have another succession war, various clans siding with various factions here and there, because the clans ended up helping or forming mercenary groups or joining other aforementioned intersphere factions, so on and so forth. A few more attempts at clan invasions, and then the Word of Blake gets all uppity and starts nuking people.
Gospel of Gilbert.
Essentially, yes. So the Word of Blake was the biggest thing I remember happening in the lore most recently, and that would have happened within the last 4 years in our time frame.
Right. So you mean this happened like... This happened while I was watching season 4 of Game of Thrones.
Kind of, sort of. MechWarrior. So, in terms of games, like games that people might have actually heard of or played, MechWarrior 3 came out in the time of the clan invasions. MechWarrior 4 came out after the clan invasions during another succession war. And as far as I know, there has not been a BattleTech game set during the time of the Word of Blake Jihad. I think the BattleTech game that came out last year came out slightly before then. Actually, no, that game was set before the clan invasion, so it's way the fuck back.
Oh, do you know what? I just realized why there's all these space feudalists.
Why is that?
It's Dune.
It is very much Dune.
It's always Dune.
It's also a fact where, despite having all these major governments in the inner sphere and the periphery, which let's not even touch on the periphery because it's just siege system governs itself because it's the periphery. No noble house has claim over it. Each individual system within the inner sphere, each planet can have their own government, be it elected democracy, a republic, dictatorship, so on and so forth, as long as they keep supporting the noble house in charge.
Oh man, I could go for a dictator's hip.
They are tasty.
Indeed. Okay, so basically you've got a whole bunch of noble houses with a whole bunch of history, all of which happened over the course of the game editions. How exactly is a new player supposed to follow all that?
You pick a game, you pick a book, you select the mechs you like, depending on which system you want to play. And if you want to use basic Innisphere tech, you pick up an early edition. You set it during the succession. You want some actually really good tech, you pick it up after the clan invasion. You want some, essentially heretic, you set it during the Word of Blake Jihad because those bastards were secretly developing shit while everybody else was squabbling amongst themselves.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I do have to wonder about that, though, because that would mean picking up in different editions, right?
Actually, by and large, the rules don't change per edition.
Yeah, but stats and stuff do, don't they?
No, you just get, you have your mechs, and then every new mech that comes out, you base it upon what kind of system it uses. If it's a battle mech, which is your standard pre-clan mech, they can swap out, say they have energy weapons, predominantly, let's say, I'm trying to think of a version. Let's say they have an Annihilator, or no, an Atlas. Let's say they have an Atlas. Atlas is the big skull-faced bastard from BattleTech. It's got rockets in it can store rockets in its chest and have some kinetic weaponry on its arms and various laser weapons. And it can swap out, you have different configurations you can swap out, but they by and large have to stay the same. Like, you can upgrade the laser, but you can't put you can upgrade from a medium laser to a large laser, add a few more heat sinks, but you can't put a long-tom artillery piece or a Gauss rifle in that laser slot.
Okay, cool. So I have one more question about BattleTech before I move on to a different subject. Nothing but LRMs. Viable?
You have the catapult and the trebuchet. The catapult being one of the predecessors to the Mad Cat, where it's essentially you have a chicken walker legs, a cockpit, a couple of lasers and guns strapped around said cockpit, and then on the shoulders you have LRM launcher. You can also kit out a Mad Cat or a Mad Cat Mark II, where it has two LRM-20s, one on each shoulder, and its arm weapons are Gauss rifles.
Don't Look for Phoebe says, nah, if you're going to fucking go all in one, grab 6 PPCs and a shit ton of heat sinks.
6 PPCs will cause most mechs to core themselves and go critical and go...
You mean like from overheating, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things you have to keep track of in this setting is your guns will overheat. And it's not just, roll a 1 and you die. You have to keep track of all the heat your weapons generate.
Honestly, I might prefer roll a 1 and you die.
There's one mech, a clan mech called a Supernova. Its entire shtick is it's got 2 fuck-off huge arms, and the arms can have 3 extended range large weapon lasers each. He's being the biggest thing you can get before you go to the particle projectile cannon that Phoebe's mentioning.
Right.
There was one time I was playing the game and I forgot about heat management, and I just said, I wonder what an alpha strike looks like on this particular mech. Playing MechWarrior 3, and I fired all 6 large lasers at one time, and my mech is...
But did his mech also explode?
Oh no, it was like, I was just testing out at the very beginning of the mission to see what happened. My mech exploded, I destroyed one of my lance mates' mechs, and critically damaged the other. It is also a viable thing in MechWarrior 4 to just, instead of having missiles on your mech, just put high explosives in those ports and just run up, overheat and blow.
Makes sense.
You also have to keep in mind that mechs are absurdly expensive. I'm talking like a light mech might cost slightly more than a F-35.
Oh, you mean like in terms of dollars?
Something like 6 million C-bills for a light mech?
Right, but I don't know what that means, because, like, is that like $6 million, or is that like 6 million yen, you know?
Stand by. I'm gonna see if I can find a conversion chart.
I'll show you a conversion chart. So I'm going to make a little bit of a segue here, because there was something else I want to talk about in terms of the making games out of politics thing. And that is the concept of the CO. Steve?
I'm here. I'm still looking up the C-bill rate.
Sure. And I want to talk about the concept of the CO because it's not one that you always see in... it's not one you always see in tabletop. When you're playing D&D, you're usually adventuring, you're usually following some kind of plot line. Someone has hired you, probably, sure, but you tend to be a freelancer. You don't have a commanding officer. And this is true in... Sorry?
Oh, I found the conversion sheet, and you're going to love it.
Go ahead.
The aforementioned 6 million C-bill light mech, as of 3062, which is the most recent setting in the game, in 2016 it converted to each C-bill costs seven is equivalent of $7.20.
Oh, so that's only like... Yeah, but that's only like 14 or 15 million dollars. Or wait, hang on, that's wrong. 6 times 7 is 42. That's only like $42 million.
For a light mech. Light mechs are useless.
Well, no, they're not.
Well, depending on which game you're playing. By and large, they're great for scouting, and if you're playing things like Mech Commander, but in the recent BattleTech game, you just want to run Steiner and run heavies and assaults as much as possible because it's...
Right, but that sounds unfun.
Yeah, except for that most weapons in MechWarrior, or you run into anything with a Gauss rifle or a PPC, they can pretty much...
Steven, are you on a train?
Oh, no, there's a train nearby running through. Apologies.
Steven, are
PPC,
you on a rocket ship?
I might be. So, a Gauss rifle or a PPC, which you can mount on a medium mech easily, can core a light mech given a good shot, usually.
Makes sense, makes sense. Anyway, I was trying to talk about COs for a second.
Yeah, go ahead, talk about COs. I like talking about COs.
So, what I find valuable, right, about about having a CO in your campaign is you can and you do have to be careful with this. You have to be very careful with this because you have to make sure that you maintain your players' freedom. If the players don't have freedom, you're not playing a game, okay? But
Railroading.
right, exactly. You have to maintain your character's your players' freedom. But okay, having a commanding officer, someone who's in a position of authority and can tell people to do things without asking politely about it, gives you the ability to occasionally, and you don't want to overuse this, but occasionally, force characters to do things they don't want to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this doesn't even have to be a commanding officer if they're military. You could just have the king say, well, this is the offer, I need you to go take care of this, and if you don't, then I'm going to have my 18 guards in the room just wreck you.
Right, exactly. You gotta have, yeah. Something like a commanding officer, somebody who tells you to do a thing and does not actually give you a choice about it.
Correct.
Don't Look for Phoebe says best to apply consequences as an inferred result of refusal. Yeah, pretty much. You know, the king wouldn't say go do it or I'll have you all killed. He would say, hey, I need someone to go take care of this, and you're expendable.
Most adventurers are.
Yep. And then you can have COs like the version of Dr. Bright in the Genius game. who mostly abuses his authority to trick people into saying the word ligma.
Or suckama.
Or D's.
Indeed.
But
coincidentally, just one more caveat. So the Mac I take my namesake from.
Yeah, the Mad Cat.
It's the Mad Cat. It is cost in C-bills for a brand spanking new Mad Cat is $24,233,000 C-bill.
That's just about the same cost as like an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Actually, that's way cheaper than an aircraft carrier.
And you can run in Lances or Stars of 4 or 6 of these bastards.
And it could probably blow up an aircraft carrier.
I have blown up an aircraft carrier in a Mad Cat before.
Makes sense. But yeah, so what I was getting at with the Dr. Bright example, right, is that your CO doesn't have to be a, puddle of mud with a stick up his ass. He can be a fun and interactive individual who still has every capability of destroying you and is still forcing you to do things you don't want to do.
Absolutely.
For a wonderful example of how, for probably the best example I've ever seen of how you can use commanding officers to make a great storyline, I recommend reading The All Guardsman Party. Because it turns out, right? It turns out, A, that the most dangerous thing to a guardsman is an enthusiastic officer. And
well, I mean, that's the most dangerous thing to any military man.
And also that the various commanders are the primary source of conflict and fun in the course of the game. Mostly because they are all either over-enthusiastic, incompetent, evil, or some combination of all three of those.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Or, they're fucking reality warpers who steal your luck.
Yes. Reality warpers who steal your luck. So then you find a guy who generates an anti-magic field, you cover him in duct tape, and you carry him on your back. Haha. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The commanding officers are what made that roleplay or storyline now, I guess, because it's like kind of hard to. I'm gonna give a minor critique of the All Guardsman Party. Okay, I understand that it's all kind of embellished and these added things, but there are things that happen that I physically cannot imagine a group of players at a table ever doing.
Case being...
A lot of the stuff that Twitch and Nubby get up to is stuff that feels like it is happening, like NPCs are doing it off screen.
Oh, you mean like jury-rigging a shit ton of servo skulls to be wandering, landmines?
For example, yes. That is not something a player did. I am fairly sure of it.
I mean, to be fair, the players going into this game were dangerously genre-savvy to begin with.
That is true because, their DM likes to kill people.
Their DM likes to kill people, and they started out in only war. They went from a full fucking regiment of guardsmen guys.
Right, sure. I'm just saying, I don't believe everything that happened. I do believe most of it. So no shit, there we were.
Indeed. I mean, it could also... I could absolutely see that. I mean, by and large, I think Doc and Sarge are probably the characters who are, I can see it now. Doc is the, player who's really into the role play and really diving into the character. Sarge is kind of that way too, but is also a bit more into the combat. And then I think basically when you get to Twitch and Nubby, Twitch's player is a power gamer, and Nubby's player is a troll.
That is probably true. Yeah, you're probably right.
Alright, so we've covered 40K in Battletech in terms of franchises.
40K in Battletech, and we've covered what I wanted to say about commanding officers and about feudalism being the objectively best form of government for this or any other society.
What else should we dive into? I mean, I guess we could dive into settings where you have less government and more something like Shadowrun or...
Oh yeah, we could actually talk about the Mad Max style. We don't have a government here.
Except we do have a government, but we don't have a government.
We have a government, and our government is basically do whatever you want, just don't piss off someone with a bigger gun than you.
Essentially, you have that. Then you also have the... well, that was weird. You can also look into the systems and everything where instead of a government, the ruling factors are essentially corporations.
Right, and that'd be Shadowrun. Actually, that would be all Cyberpunk, really. Like, Like the basic premise of Cyberpunk is that corporations control the government and everything else, and everything's just for profit, and the world is dismal and terrible because everyone is having all of the profits squeezed out of them at all times by a cabal of evil executives. That sounds an awful lot like now.
Yeah, it really does. That's depressing. You can also look at it as the fact that that's probably what pre-Armageddon Terra was like in 40K, or pre-Armageddon Terra was like in Battletech. Corporations ruled everything, and then everything went to shit. And then you have the point where either the God Emperor of Mankind shows up and starts kicking ass and taking names, or you have the setting where essentially everything starts breaking up into noble houses.
Right, but actually I don't think that this happened in 40K, because you gotta remember from like the year 20K to the year... from the year like 10 to 15K or something like that. I don't remember the exact dates, but there was a golden age of man there. I'm sorry, the dark age of technology.
Right, you have the dark age of technology.
Right, but the dark age of
what was that you were saying about cyberpunk, where corporations rule everything and it's only for profit, and essentially they're going to make the best technology of it.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't think it was. Oh, actually, hang on. This is not a good moment for this because we're talking about politics and not plot holes. But there is something wrong with Warhammer 40k's timeline.
You don't say.
No, it's a huge gaping hole, okay? Somewhere...
I mean, I can't imagine a franchise where essentially it started out running just on rule of cool and they realized, oh, fuck, we need lore, would ever have plot.
Okay, no, but this is a huge one, okay? Follow me here, right? So, sometime between right now and the year 15,000 or so, there is a vast... galaxy-wide human empire, the Human Federation, right? That's a thing that exists. There's the Human Federation.
Yeah.
And then sometime in like 10 or 15,000 AD, the Men of Iron rise up, and that giant galaxy-spanning human empire gets shattered and driven back to Terra, which is then cut off by a warp storm. Okay.
For those not familiar with the lore, the Men of Iron are essentially Skynet.
Right, robots, yeah. Evil robots trying to kill all humans. But, then, in 20,000 something, the Eldar murderfuck Slaanesh into existence. At the heart of their galaxy-spanning empire that had been there all along.
Oh, what you're saying is because there's no space,
What I'm saying is, how is it possible that there was a galaxy-spanning human federation before the all-powerful Eldar Empire murderfucked Slaanesh into existence?
I thought the all-powerful Eldar murderfucked Slaanesh into existence before humanity, ascended to
the birth of Slaanesh. The birth of Slaanesh and the creation of the Eye of Terror is what stopped the warp storms around Terra to allow the Emperor to do the Reconquista. So what I'm saying is that both of those things cannot be true.
I mean, to be fair, it is a plot hole, but they could easily explain it away just as unreliable narrator.
I realize that. I'm just saying that I think there's actually a better explanation for that. I think there's a much better explanation for that.
Care to share?
We've got the year wrong.
Oh?
Yeah, it's not the 40th millennium. It's like the 60th millennium. That explains everything.
So what you're saying is, at some point during the dark age of humanity, when not so much cyborgs, but robots tried to wipe out humanity, we reverted back to a system where we fucked up the date.
Right, yeah. At some point we must have screwed up the date. And actually, Rowboat Girlyman backs me up on this because he looked at the Imperial record keeping and realized that they had no freaking idea what year it was.
That makes absolute sense. I mean, we also have to take into fact that, but even farther back than that, so with the system being fucked up and everything, you have Eldar murderfucking Slaanesh into existence, the galaxy-spanning human empire, the Men of Iron. When are the Necrons having a fairly large,
that was 65 million years ago, actually. That's fine. Like the War in Heaven and the Necron Empire, that happened so long ago that it's not even on the same time scale as the stuff we're talking about.
Right.
But what I am saying is that there is no way that there was a galaxy-spanning human empire and a galaxy-spanning Eldar empire that coexisted, and yet somehow all humans simultaneously forgot how to do space travel but the Eldar didn't. That is not possible.
You raise a good point.
That was completely unrelated to the topic of that hand, but I had to get it off my chest because Warhammer 40k does not make sense.
Well, we know it doesn't make sense. Hell, BattleTech doesn't make sense, and it's, not as convoluted.
I mean, hell, D&D doesn't make sense. No, seriously, D&D does not make sense.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I heard you rolling dice. It was a nice touch.
I
Look,
actually rolled a 1 there. That's terrible.
Look, all I'm saying is... that's a 14. All I'm saying is that there is something wrong with society that has something, I think, to do with the fact that it is not actually all that hard to become an all-powerful wizard who can control the minds of literally thousands of people.
Except for the fact that you have those plucky adventurers, and they're going to go out to try to stop that from happening.
Yeah, but you just mind control them because you're an all-powerful wizard.
But what if they have an all-powerful wizard on their side?
How did they get an all-powerful wizard? You're mind controlling everyone.
Yes, but how do you know that there's not another wizard who's going for the same goal, since as you're closer than he is, and decides to, enlist the help of a few teenage adventurers to go on a quest to kill his competition?
Oh my god. So, someday, someone, not any of you, will be in a game, and it will seem like a normal game of D&D. It will seem perfectly fine. You might have a commanding officer, you might just adventure, but one day you're going to realize that nothing you've been doing has made any sense whatsoever, and that actually you've all been mind controlled by a wizard.
I mean, as we're so fond of here, we do love our tropes. Just remember, a wizard did it.
I mean, in D&D, like very specifically, a wizard did in fact do it 100% of the time. If a god did it, a wizard did it, because the gods are just wizards.
Yeah, essentially. I do love going and diving into the story, so like with Irvis Kale, where he essentially, shanked his own fucking god in an alleyway because...
I had not heard that one.
So, by Paul S. Kemp, one of my favorite writers, he did a couple of stories in the Forgotten Realms setting before all the planes melding and all that fun shit happened in that setting. Following the adventures of a thief and a rogue and an assassin named Irvis K. You have his starting adventures, where he goes out and becomes essentially an assassin in the service of the god Mask. You have a brief period of time where he served as a butler for a noble house, essentially becoming a hyper-lethal Jeeves. And then he goes on to leave that house, go into the service, become a living creature of shadow. Actually, no, I think I have my dates wrong. He was a thief. He was in the service of the nobles. He left, went out, became a being of shadows, went out on another quest to aid his god when his god's essentially mother came in and started to try to fuck over the world, and then became an aspect of his god. But at some point during all of that, between the stories crossing over, he shanked his god in an alleyway because his god came there to try to convince him to return to his service, and he said, fuck you, and shanked him in the ribs with a dagger.
You shanked Mask.
He shanked Mask.
I mean, it's no Old Man Henderson, but it's not bad.
It's not bad. For reading purposes, I recommend you look up Paul S. Kemp, the Irvis Kale trilogy, and the... Hold on one second. Yes, the Twilight War trilogy, and then followed by another book he wrote following Irvis Kale's son, who was part Shadeling and essentially became a god. They might have also faced Mephiston. Or Mephistopheles at one point. He was good stories.
Yeah, sounds like.
He's not as well known as Salvador when it comes to writing, but he's got really good stuff. I really enjoy his work.
You know, I don't actually like Salvatore very much.
I mean, regardless of what you think about him, he did help to establish a lot of the understanding and the lore of the Forgotten Realms, at least in the Sword Coast area. Without him, I don't think there would be nearly as many people familiar with that specific part of the world and Waterdeep and everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I'm also actually, like, real talk, besides the Underdark, I'm not a huge fan of the Forgotten Realms, but I can see why people are.
You know what? Speaking of Forgotten Realms, there is a system of government there that's hilarious.
Are you talking about the Red Hand? Or the what are they called?
I'm talking about the Masked Lords of Waterdeep.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I don't know about these guys.
So I'm essentially going to try to pull this from my, Bourbon clouded mind. Waterdeep is one of the largest cities on the Sword Coast. It's a center of trade. It's got a strong port, strong military presence in the region. Pretty much anything that happens in the Sword Coast passes through Waterdeep at one point or another. But Waterdeep, the city, does not have a formal ruler, maybe a mayor or something. But by and large, the real power in Waterdeep lies with its council of masked lords, where they are all movers and shakers in society. But you'll never know if you're, standing next to a masked lord or two or three masked lords, because they all wear satin masks at the meetings and have staffs that change their voices. So essentially, it's a major city that is openly ruled by a shadowy cabal of unknown people. They're not all
openly.
evil. Openly, like everybody knows about the masked lords.
Oh,
It's
you know
just
what?
none of the masked lords know who the other masked lords are. Well, they do and they don't. So, in the Venture Brothers, how the Guild of Calamitous Intent has their council, and they all have the anonymous screens and everything, but a lot of them still know who the other ones are.
Right.
It's kind of like that, except on a larger scale, as opposed to like 13 members. You've got like something like up to like 100 masked lords, but you have like the greater lords over certain areas and then minor lords, and it's essentially like a parliament, except everybody's wearing fancy masks.
So, I'm gonna do a quick story time actually on this subject.
Okay.
So, I once ran an evil campaign.
Oh boy.
I ran a campaign where my players were the agents of an evil country. Actually, it was a nation that had been formed by the dark races that had risen from the Underdark, including, men of the West, let's say, and Drow and God, what were they called? The Dark Dwarves, the Grey Dwarves.
That's Swerf Binland. That's the gnomes. Durgar.
The Durgar, that's the one. So these three evil races had kind of come together, right, out of necessity, because they've been attacked by an outside force that had invaded the Underdark, and they've been forced out of the Underdark.
So they came together right now?
Over me, right. And lacking a better way of doing things, they ended up being a democracy, or a representative democracy. You see, each race elected a number of councilmen who all made decisions together. And there weren't very many of them. There were, I want to say it was 13 because I was young, and 13 sounded cool, but so there were 13 councilmen that were elected. These were actual elected officials. And they made all the decisions. But these people all being evil, every single one of them, there were just a huge number of, little misdirections and things that they were doing. So at one point in the campaign, the party ended up, killing one of the councilmen, or they thought they did. But it turned out that the guy who sat on the council was never actually the councilman, and the actual elected official was his girlfriend.
Yep, that's very Masked Lord-esque.
Right, exactly. So that was how that went. I want to make another quick note about that. So they killed the guy, right? But it turned out to be the wrong guy, and then they were attacked by his girlfriend, who was a councilwoman and a sorceress. And they were the Nick's cleric of mask threw a diplomacy die down and got a 35 or something, and got very angry at me when I told him, no, she's not listening to you, she's trying to murder you because you just killed her boyfriend.
Hell hath no fury?
Well, I hate D&D's diplomacy and bluff checks, okay? They are garbage. I'm going to say that without any qualification. Bluff and diplomacy do not work as intended in those games.
You actually have a point, and I come across this every time I play a character in many games.
Right. So I just say, this is one of my quirks as a dungeon master, okay? There are situations where you are not going to be able to talk your way out of it. Murdering someone's boyfriend in front of her is one of those situations.
The rules and everything essentially play bluff, diplomacy, and all that essentially as their, non-spell slotted spells. If you have decent dice,
exactly. Like a middling level bard can just take someone from wanting to kill them to friendly in a roll, and it's just not acceptable.
I think in any situation such as that, if you're going to, and this is just me, and I'll probably start, fighting to homebrew this any game I play in or run. Oh yeah, you can absolutely throw a dice at it, but you still have to convince me.
See, that's usually how I come at it, because just throwing dice for social stuff, it's fine for some people, okay? If you're not wanting to do the whole, speech roleplay thing, fine. But if you are wanting to do that, then really we should just be talking.
I mean, yeah, because you end up in situations where most of the time this is where I fall in, because I rarely play faces in my games, where the face is either incompetent or fucks up their role or haven't taking notes, or they don't know the information that could be said to, solve a situation without bloodshed. And yet, the fighter or the rogue or the paladin or somebody like that, they do. But because they're not spec'd into diplomacy or bluff and intimidate, they can't do anything.
Right. And that's, for that
I could
reason,
sit there and make a 5-minute, pouring my heart out speech and trying to sway this person over to our side, hitting all the points that we need to, but because my dice roll isn't good enough, or because I don't have it.
Right, and that's why when I run games, when I run D&D specifically, this is actually true in World of Darkness too, but I tend to use those social roles as so if you lie to my face, then I'll usually make you roll a bluff check to see if you can actually tell that lie convincingly. And if you... but if you're doing diplomacy, if you're attempting diplomacy, if you make a solid argument at me, then I'm usually just not even going to make you roll. If it's kind of a middling argument, I'll make you roll. And if your argument just sucks, I'm not even going to bother. I'll tell you to roll and then tell you it wasn't good enough.
Right. And you also end up in situations such as with Intimidate. Which for some reason is, if I remember correctly, isn't Intimidate based off charisma as well?
It is, yes.
So you could have a barbarian, an orc barbarian, and they're trying to intimidate the halfling shopkeeper or a halfling merchant or whatever, or human merchant, just somebody who's smaller than them. And behind them, they have a tiefling sorcerer juggling fire, and then like a fucking halfling rogue, picking dirt out from under their fingernails with a dagger. And with Intimidate, they can't, just one lone person, they can't intimidate them to get anything across.
Well, so, the Dungeon Master's Guide would tell you that you should be stacking bonuses for that kind of stuff to make the roll better.
Every time I end up doing it, it's always like, oh yeah, you've got this, but, only thing the other guys can do is roll it to 8.
Well, rolling to 8 is what that rule is for, yes, but what I'm saying is you would get a bonus on the roll for being huge and scary, and you get a bonus on the roll for being helped, and you get a bonus on the roll for being helped by another person, so, and that all amounts to being like a +6 on the roll, so...
Yeah, this is true, but I don't know, it's weird.
I usually just run civilians as cowardly, personally, but...
Oh, you mean like that time where my character picked up the guy from his bed and slammed him against a wall?
Yes, exactly like that, actually. Turns out.
That was fun. Because I basically said, fuck you to the off switch.
Oh, yeah! Your character broke mind control to torture that guy.
He were mad.
Good times. Good times.
Which brings me to, something else. We've been talking about massive, politics in the term of massive countries and organizations. We haven't really covered on the whole politics of a group. We covered group politics,
yeah. So, adventuring parties either have a leader, like Sarge.
Like Sarge, or, a paladin of some sort, or maybe a particularly courageous fighter, or a sorcerer or wizard, or, or a fighter who's being controlled by a wizard.
Right. They usually have some kind of leader. Or they're like a fully unanimous, what is it called? A consensus democracy? Where the adventurers are like, well, okay, if we all agree, we'll do it.
which I'm pretty sure is what we're essentially doing in the Genius campaign until we throw a monkey wrench into everything.
Well, so the Genius game is interesting because it seems to normally be a consensus democracy, but occasionally Chuck will just go, no, we are doing this now, period, and then nobody questions it.
I mean, to be fair, sometimes Susan does that as well, but by and large,
she gets questioned.
Susan gets questioned. By and large, it seems that when Chuck makes a decision like that, Robin and Slips just follow along with.
Yeah, that seems like what happens.
Oh God, does that make Chuck the leader of the group?
I don't know.
Can I do story time?
You may do story time.
Brandon's probably going to know what I'm about to refer to in terms of as we're talking about group dynamic and group politics. We recently had a session in our Genius campaign where we essentially went to hell and we were debating amongst ourselves on how we were going to proceed about dealing with the end boss of the particular. And my character essentially
well, didn't
Well,
say
okay,
it, but
a powerful NPC who might have been an end boss had you fought him.
mm-hmm.
I was just clarifying. Do continue.
Yeah, to be fair, that's what I meant. And all three of the other characters. Just a shout out to Phoebe in the chat, who plays Susan, and our buddies Caleb and Pat, who has been on the podcast before. Pat, who plays Slips, and Caleb, who plays Robin, who are all discussing on how we're going to handle the situation, whether it be non-violently in the form of Slips, wait and see what happens in the form of Robin, and just kill in the form of Susan, by and large. And my character Chuck got tired of listening to the discussion and just slowly backed away into the elevator, activated the elevator, and went up and had, what was it, two to three rounds of fighting before they caught on?
It was 3 rounds of combat before they caught on, yeah.
So you have situations like that in the group dynamic, which is kind of going to other topics we've had, but group politics is, if you don't have an agreed upon consensus.
Well, see, that's actually interesting, because that's a situation that can really only happen in World of Darkness, because in D&D, you did not have the DPS to actually fight that enemy.
Oh, no.
But see, in World of Darkness, if the meathead, the combat-capable character, decides to go fight somebody, there's not a whole lot the rest of the party can actually do to stop him.
This is true. It also helps that my meathead is throwing out some pretty significant damage in his own right.
I mean, and actually, okay, I called him a meathead just there, but Chuck is an actual genius. That's the point of the game. He is a mad scientist. It's so kudu. And so I call him a meathead, but he's only a meathead by comparison to the rest of the group.
Which isn't to say that he doesn't have his own moments. He's a very good investigator.
Yes, investigator. That's what he is.
Yeah. I kind of took him away from what I was initially going with when I discovered I could just make bigger and bigger guns.
Yeah, that's what that's actually the story of that character in a nutshell. Well, you can just make bigger and bigger guns.
And as he makes bigger and bigger guns, threats become less threatening.
Yeah, because the guns get bigger.
There was that one time he put a sign into orbit, though.
I mean, that wasn't the gun's fault. That was kind of the sign's fault.
But it was still a decision he made.
Okay, so the story that he's alluding to there. His party once ran across... Okay, so his party often runs across things that do not exist in World of Darkness lore. Supernatural entities, strange creatures, anomalous objects, stuff out of the SCP wiki, really. And one time, they ran across a street sign that said speed limit 55 on it. Well, it turned out that it worked by making the universal speed limit 55 miles an hour. As in the speed of light. The speed of light was 55 miles an hour. So, Chuck, realizing that physically speaking, this meant that his gun would fire bullets at a solid 99.9999999% the speed of light, decided to shoot a gun at the road sign. The road sign being indestructible, and the bullet moving at a fair clip faster than is physically possible for it to move, the street sign is now a kinetic kill vehicle somewhere out in the ether, waiting to hit some unsuspecting alien planet and annihilate it.
Yeah. Isaac Newton really is the most deadly son of bitch in the universe.
Yeah, Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest son of a bitch in space. But yeah, so inter-party politics, you've got your meathead who is capable, totally capable, of just taking charge of the situation and going and handling it, right? But then you've got, you're more socially minded that wanna see all angles and figure out what the best solution is. And then you've got the followers who don't really want to make a decision. They just kind of want to follow along with everyone else does, which is absolutely also fine. If everyone's a leader, no one's a leader. So, absolutely feel free to play a follower. That's not a problem. We're just talking about how that works in the inter-party politics.
Then you also have that character who is not the standard leader, is not the normal face, but is the one behind the scenes, usually controlling everything, pushing people to do.
Yeah, you can do that. You can either accomplish that with mind control or with some actual roleplay, or both.
Have the wizard be best friends with the big burly barbarian, and then nobody will argue with what's. Hey, Trogdor, you should totally go charge that guy right now.
That's actually another reason why it's kind of important to have to have a concept of the actual relationship between your characters. Like, even if even starting a new campaign, it's not a bad thing to have your characters have known each other beforehand.
Which is actually something that we have a tendency to do when we're making our own worlds and everything.
Yeah. When we do freeform, we usually do that.
We've come up with some good ones here in recent history.
It's been good. Another thing about that, actually, so I just said you usually want to make sure your characters know each other, but there are actually cases where that's not true. I'm going to go back to the evil campaign. Everybody's alignment was some flavor of evil, and they were being literally forced to work together by a commanding officer. But because they were all evil and did not know each other, there was never a single hint of trust in that group. And it was delightful.
I mean, to be fair, I could see how that would be amusing.
It was pretty excellent.
Did you ever have a chaotic evil character in a game where you actually had to reevaluate how many times in your life you'd have to say the term, "Why did you eat the cat?"
No, that has never happened to me. I've never had anyone who played like a lunatic evil character. I've had people play lunatic neutral characters.
I think one of my favorite alignment charts I saw was from D20 Monkey, where they set it up and just painted pictures of your generic players in each one. Of course, true neutral, or not true neutral, law neutral was Judge Dredd. And then the chaotic evil character was a barbarian with blood covering his mouth. There's essentially the line was, "But it was only 3 kittens."
I don't know whether eating kittens is necessarily evil.
Yeah. To be fair, the chaotic neutral character was break out the peanut butter. This is going to be fun.
Speaking of chaotic neutral characters, let me tell you about the dumbest character I ever had in a game.
Oh boy, story time.
Well, this is going to be a pretty quick one. So, at one point in one of my games, one of the players got trampled by a giant skeleton and their character died. The replacement of that character was a half-orc fighter who, when he entered the game, did not have a name because the player couldn't be arsed to give him one, did not have a backstory because the player couldn't be arsed to give him one, and only had the motivation to seek out portals for some reason, okay? But then, at some point, this metamorphosed into, instead of looking for mystical portals, he was trying to destroy all portals. Meaning doors and windows.
And portcullises.
And portcullises, yes. This character gained the moniker Door Crusher the Insane. He became a fixture in the party. He actually lasted He actually lasted much longer than the original character this guy was playing lasted. And he actually, eventually gained some some tiny spark of personality beyond crushing doors. But this dude crushed so many doors that I eventually just gave him Detect Secret Doors as a spell-like ability. Despite the fact that he was a barbarian.
Oh, God.
It's like, you know what? Fine. If you care about doors so goddamn much.
Just like you just have this middle image of this orc barbarian wandering through a dungeon with a warhammer smacking against the wall and revealing a passage.
Literally happened, yes.
Oh, God. So, trying to pull back to the topic at hand.
I don't know that we're going to do that.
Yeah, we can try, at least for a little bit. So, intergroup politics, you always, like we were saying, it's great to have established character relations beforehand and all that. But as the game goes on, you're going to notice that depending on not so much the stats and everything involving the characters, but your players are going to form their own attachments to everything. Players who are more charismatic than others, they're going to bring everybody in and be able to convince others, like, oh, this is a good idea, let's do this. Where despite whatever you might have set up in the beginning of the campaign, like you might have the paladin be the leader of the group, on paper, but then it's really, this player at the table who is, saying, oh, we should do this, and people kind of falling in line with it.
True. And that kind of touches, like, whether or not you want to limit out-of-character communication. And some DMs do. Some DMs say you cannot talk to each other out of character, for example. You can't make any suggestions about strategy or anything. You can't say anything your character wouldn't say, and you can only share in-character information. Some people do that. I'm not one of the people that does that, because I don't feel like the immersion is worth the effort.
Yeah, I could see that, because it also comes to the fact if it's somebody who picks a very specific voice for one of their characters, and that voice is grating, or either for people to hear or for that person to actually portray, that can get brutal for them.
Every character should have some kind of voice to them, yes.
Why, yes, I absolutely agree with that particular feat. Or as in such with my Dark Heresy campaign when I played a tech. Oh yes, I feel the machine's pain. I can tell you exactly how this creature, this dreadful, dreadful servitor, came into existence.
Columbo is overrated as a show. Anyway.
I think we're hitting that. We like doing voices for our characters. It's fun.
I have so many NPCs, and if I don't do voices, they all sound the same. This is like being a DM. It involves a lot of vocal improv.
Hell, being a player, especially if you're in multiple campaigns, which I think is kind of sort of why on our little write-ups it has us both listed as voice actor.
I think that we're actually both listed as voice actor in that because we're doing this show.
Well, I mean, we also do the various...
We also do acting with our voices, now that I think about it. We just don't do it in any kind of professional or recorded capacity.
Yeah, because we're not professionals. We're amateurs, strictly speaking. But we do have very, very interesting voices that we can portray from time to time.
Are you okay?
That
was a really interesting voice.
I think I need help.
Well, now, I don't know about any kind of help I could give you, but you might try speaking like a man.
You cut out there, sir.
I said you might try speaking like a man.
Well, yes, I could absolutely do that thing you just mentioned.
Rows of teeth. Okay, all right. I think that we're starting to get silly. We are definitely starting to get silly. And I'm starting to get drunk.
I'm not quite there yet.
I've only had one, but it was a me one.
Oh boy, I've only had, well, I topped mine off a little bit ago. It might just be because I'm kind of outside in the cold smoking right now as well, but
Yeah, real talk. I kind of miss smoking.
Intergroup politics.
Intergroup politics.
So we've established the various archetypes for that. You have the leader, you have the followers, you have the meathead, and then you have the, usually in the form of a wizard of some sort, of maybe a particularly high charisma rogue.
Right, and that makes sense if you're playing the game quote unquote correctly. By that I mean if you are trying to play your character's actual int score.
Right.
Which is something that I have a lot of trouble with. I mean, I tend to just run high intelligence characters because, you know.
Yeah, if you have high intelligence, you can justify most things.
True. I tend to run high intelligence characters, but part of the reason for that is because even as a dungeon master, I really have trouble playing somebody who's kind of dim. Like, I have trouble with that. You know, some of the NPCs that you run into, they're not supposed to be smarter than the average bear, but they end up coming off that way because I'm just not that good at it.
We do suffer from I can never pronounce that particular thing. What was it? Sesquipedalian loquacious?
Sesquipedalian loquaciousness?
Yeah, that.
Yeah, a little bit. But
we both suffer from that.
We do. But at the table, right, at the tabletop, you're supposed to kind of let the person with the high int the high int or the high wisdom make the decisions, let the person with the high charisma do the talking, let the person with the high strength do the smashing, etc. But it doesn't always work out that way because, well, players don't tend to make characters that are just like themselves.
They really don't, but you also end up in situations where those particular party dynamics don't end up working.
Right,
I'm not going to name
we
names.
We did talk about this when we had that episode on party dynamics, but
I don't know if I told this story during that particular episode, but there was a campaign. It was a Pathfinder game where we had everybody kind of divvied up. I was playing a Blast Sorcerer, and we had a player came in who wanted to play a trap-finding monk.
I'm just going to note real quick, and it might be because I'm drunk, but every time you say Blast Sorcerer, I hear Blastoise.
Well, I did essentially play a Blastoise. I did play an Undine Kineticist in one.
That would literally be a Blastoise.
But this was in a 3D Sorcerer. Anyway, so in this particular campaign, I ended up playing the Sorcerer because the player came in and wanted to play the trap-finding monk, and in the session we were running, there was a campaign trait you could take, where they could take trap-finding fairly. That's no problem. You know, most players would understand how to play trap-finding, but then you end up in situations where the player who's supposed to be finding traps doesn't look for traps ever. And the person who's supposed to be the leader of the party is a paladin or whatever, despite their high charisma score, doesn't do anything to actually benefit the party when making command decisions, and things just kind of devolve from there. So you have to resort to, are you going to follow the party politics that are established in character, or are you going to form your own party politics from then on?
Yeah, that's true.
By and large, I think we're getting at politics are messy.
Yeah, they really are. And this is one of those things where there's actually no right way, right?
Yeah.
See, and last time when I said we're going to get all political, Steve thought I was gonna rant about that guy, the Donald.
Ugh. And so far, we've done good. We haven't really hit on much of that, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, all I have to say about that subject is, Donnie, you're out of your element.
I'm sorry, I believe the exact quote is, shut the fuck up, Donnie, you're out of your element.
Yes, that's the one. That's exactly the one. Big Lebowski references are always correct. Did you know that no less than 3 dissertations have been written on the Big Lebowski?
There's a religion, I believe?
There is, but I find it more interesting that that there are people in this world who have actual doctorates that they earned by analyzing the Big Lebowski.
We live in magical times.
And more importantly, that there's more than one. Like, you realize dissertations have to be different from anything that's ever been published.
Yeah.
They have to be new, which means that 2 different people analyzed the Big Lebowski 2 different ways.
3 different people.
Yeah. Okay. I'm drunk enough that we're talking Big Lebowski. I think we might want to call it.
I was having fun.
Well, actually, did you have anything else to add? Do we have any more? Do we have any more political stuff to talk about? I mean, because we can, but like I'm kind of drunk.
I mean, it's just more fun when we end up failing our saves.
I know, but I
mean, we only skimmed over this whole cyberpunk.
That's true. We only skimmed Cyberpunk. Let's go back to Cyberpunk, and let's go back to Mad Max. So,
yeah.
So Cyberpunk politics is... I think my problem with Cyberpunk politics is they kind of hit too close to home, you know? The corporation owns everything, and you just kind of live a sad life while you try to climb the corporate ladder. It works for a certain kind of bleak despair, which is a fine theme as far as, you know, roleplay goes, but I don't see very much Cyberpunk tabletop. Like, people don't play Shadowrun that I'm aware of anymore.
Some people play Shadowrun.
I'm sure people do. I'm just saying that Shadowrun's not as popular as it used to be, and, you know, Cyberpunk video games are way more popular than Cyberpunk tabletop ever was.
I.e. the various Shadowrun RPG.
Right. And I'm going to suggest, as a reason for that, it's possible that the reason for that is that Cyberpunk lacks liberty. Because Big Brother's always watching you in Cyberpunk, and the company is always watching you, and you have to pay for everything, and it's not an environment that lends itself to the kind of freedom that you expect in tabletop roleplay.
Yeah, you could look at that. I mean, you could also look at it from a perspective of, in most cyberpunk settings, you're going to have someone who is a hacker, whose whole shtick is to stay away from Big Brother watching everything, so you can get a bit of freedom from that, but then you have to deal with, you know, the corporations coming down on you like the almighty wrath of the God Emperor.
True. And, you know, and obviously I'm not saying that you can't run a tabletop game in a cyberpunk situation, because obviously you can, and, you know, I'm sure it can be really good, and I'm sure you can create a sort of sense of that liberty. You know, just, I just don't know, anybody that plays in that setting, and, well, you know what, if you do play at that setting, just go ahead and Twitch me, hashtag Brandon's totally wrong about Cyberpunk. That's a lot of characters for a hashtag, but still.
Lots of characters. Rows of teeth.
Rows of teeth. We're just going to keep doing that, aren't we?
Probably.
So, I'm going to talk about one more political system. And that political system is no politics. I want to talk to you about Mad Max.
Oh, what a day. What a wonderful day.
Mediocre. So, anarchy, right? Anarchy in the UK. It's kind of the opposite.
There's panic on the streets of London.
Exactly. It's kind of the opposite of the cyberpunk situation, right? It's a situation where probably there's actually too much freedom, so you have no idea what to do. You end up with, we end up with a situation where the players can basically do anything that the resources support.
Yeah,
to a point, because obviously there's no such thing as true anarchy, and in Mad Max, for example, the governments that work get replaced by roving gangs that have their own hierarchy, so there is still kind of a government, it's just there's many governments and they're all fighting each other.
I mean, you also have the fact that you have the governments, set up by the various villages and outposts and everything. They have their own form of government as well. It's just, in terms of these are smaller setups than what you have in terms of everything else.
Right, and that means you've got to put a lot more work in it, because one village is going to be way different from another village, because there is no overarching government.
I think a way you could compare it to would be essentially the city-states of Greece.
Yeah, kind of. You know what? This idea, because I've never seen an RP that took place in a truly lawless waste. Actually, we're kind of doing one now, but it hasn't gotten rolling yet. Because I've never seen a tabletop game that took place in an actual lawless waste, I think that I'm going to try to run one. I think one of the next games I run, and it's going to be a short one, is going to be post-apocalyptic D&D.
I'm all for this. You have my support.
Yeah, it's gonna be a game where the world ended in magical nuclear hellfire a while ago, and is just kind of starting to rebuild, and it's a giant blasted desert, and it's just Mad Max in a fantasy world.
I'm sold.
Yep, I'm gonna do that.
I mean, going from the whole apocalyptic setting and everything, looking at other forms of media, not just Mad Max, there's you could look at it in the perspective of Desert Punk, which is a glorious anime and manga I highly recommend to anyone, because it's hilarious and very similar. It's a blasted nuclear hellscape with various outlying communities and such.
But is it anarchy?
Outside the cities, yeah. I mean, you've got the central government in the east and west and so on and so forth, but by and large, once you're out in the desert, nobody gives a fuck unless it can be proven by, witnesses, and in which point you just mainly end up with posse.
Okay, but Steve. Who run Bartertown?
Omae wa mo shinderu?
No, Master Blaster runs Bartertown, damn it. Although, you're right, actually, Fist of the North Star takes place in such a world.
Correct. I mean, you also have, you could look at even video games like Fallout or, what was it, Wasteland. Granted, those are a little bit more built up, and you have the various, societies trying to pull themselves up from the ashes, but by and large, there's no overarching government trying to control it, beyond the enclave or...
Fallout's actually an interesting case of this, because, right, Fallout has the RPGs, but... And I'm sure one exists because I have physically seen the source book for it, but I have never known a person who played the Fallout tabletop game.
We should do that thing.
Well, I don't know. I've never seen anyone who played it, so I imagine it's not any good, but who knows, right?
Well, I mean, again, to be fair, To be fair, I've never seen anyone play the BattleTech RPG, but I've heard nothing but good things from the internet.
True. What I'm saying is, like, I think that Cyberpunk and Anarchy have the same, or have exact opposite problems when it comes to actually tabletop role playing them. It's just, it's too free. There's not, you can't. What do you actually do in a world where you can do anything?
I mean, I imagine a good plot hook for either one of those. In the Cyberpunk setting, your entire goal of your campaign is to eliminate Big Brother.
So wait, the goal of the Cyberpunk campaign is to create the Mad Max campaign?
And the goal of the Mad Max campaign is to establish a overarching controlling government.
Right, or you could run a Mad Max campaign where you're just a roving gang of gasoline thieves.
I'm sorry, gasoline? Guzzling.
Guzzling, you're right. But
Or bullet farms.
yeah, it's true. Well, that's what I'm saying. You could reasonably run a survival campaign in the Mad Max universe where you're just doing what you have to do to survive and you end up murdering a bunch of innocent people. But that doesn't sound all that fun, does it?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure there's a Walking Dead RPG out there that's pretty much the entire premise.
But why?
I don't know. I would like to point out examples such as DayZ.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing, though. Like, that's the difference between a tabletop game and a third-person shooter. In DayZ, right? In DayZ, you've got PvP and building and crafting and... Well, okay, you got building and crafting and PvP in the tabletop, too. But what I'm saying is, in DayZ, you've got a large number of people that are all together fighting zombies and each other. In a tabletop game, you've got like 5 people against a horde of zombies and some NPCs.
True, but you also have to look at it from a perspective, kind of as in The Walking Dead. Not so much in DayZ, because the entire thing with DayZ, people killing each other, is because people are assholes.
Yeah, that's literally the entire cause of it, yes.
I mean, you have to look at it from a perspective of what do you do when you're placed in a situation like that? Are you going to do whatever it takes to survive? In which case, you're going to be an outlier, and you're not so much going to be an outlier. You need to form these groups and confederations in order to survive, because it's easier for a group to gather the resources to survive than a single person, because they can deal with other large groups.
That's true. That is true. That's why you would do it. Yes. I'm just saying that like a Walking Dead tabletop game that was specifically Walking Dead fandom tabletop just sounds so limited. Like, I feel like you could only play that game once.
Yeah, probably. But at the same token, you could probably only play like a Fallout RPG once in the same token.
Yeah, you're right, actually. You are correct. Yeah, you're right. That's true.
It all comes down to how you want to set up your various campaigns. God, what was the movie? I'm probably memorizing it wrong.
And we failed to save!
About fucking time. What was it? Priest, where you had the group of, fucking monster slayers roaming the waste trying to save the remaining outliers of...
I don't know, but that sounds amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely have a survival horror campaign where you've got some sort of established community that the players are going out in an attempt to eliminate threats, i.e., there's a horde of zombies or horde of monsters coming this way, or there's this band of raiders who are going to try to come out and stop us. And the entire premise is you go out and protect this settlement. It's just, instead of having this massive overarching, you're wandering through the various, wandering around the world, you're centralized.
Another settlement needs your help.
Yeah. Fuck you, Preston.
Actually, that would be a good idea for a campaign to run for when I finally decide to get on the Hitler scale of character death.
Yeah, I'm working on a game like that with my Dark Heresy game I'm working on. Also, Phoebe, I mean, no, if we're going with any kind of magical setting, the zombies right away, and then you just have an army of skeletons.
That is true. And an army of skeletons is much worse than an army of zombies.
Because they don't give a fuck about swords or gunfire.
Actually, it's because you have a skeleton inside you right now.
Spooky, scary skeletons.
Have you had your calcium?
Yes. I've also had my bourbon.
Yeah, me too. Okay, this time I think I really am finished.
Aha!
I'd like to thank everybody who watched this episode, and everybody who will watch this episode over on my YouTube channel, and everyone who bears with us while we make episodes that have titles like Getting All Political, in which we mostly talk about Battletech and never get political. And okay, I'm a little drunk.
I mean, we kind of sort of got political with that, but by and large, we just kind of gave the overview of Battletech and didn't dive into the various systems.
Steve, don't worry, I'm playing. But yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and I'm gonna go ahead and play us out. I deeply appreciate everybody, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time, where our next episode will be. I don't know yet. We'll figure it out, won't we, Steve?
Indeed. Remember, the Emperor protects, and a large mech can protect you from more things than that.
More things than the Emperor?
I mean, it is the strength of arms upon which the Imperium survives.
And the might of the God Emperor. And playing us out.